Sup nerds and welcome back to the Help We're Nerds podcast. Today we're reviewing Maul Shadow Lord as our Star Wars celebration. Happy Star Wars Day and may the 4th be with you. If you haven't already, go check out our celebrations from last year and the year before. Last year is a special one. I enjoyed it the most. We looked back on the Book of Boba Fett and whether it worked. Spoiler alert, I don't think it did. But with that being said, let's get into this one. So, let's start off with a non-spoiler review. So, non-spoiler part, I think the sound design and visuals of this show were phenomenal. And it's something I would expect from Star Wars. I think the animation department always does a phenomenal job. I think it's their strongest point, if I'm being honest, especially since Disney took over. Star Wars physical media, live action, is always hit and miss, especially when it comes to the movies. I think their shows are pretty good, although again, that is hit and miss, and depends on taste. But most of the time, as Star Wars fans, we can usually agree that the animation slaps. Clone Wars, Rebels, this. It's always been really, really good. And I do think that they need to not ditch live action, because that is the backbone of where Star Wars started with the original trilogy. But I do think they need to focus a bit more on the animation department and less on the live action, especially for Disney Plus, and maybe release films to supplement the animation rather than completely use live action all the time. I think it works better. I think Star Wars as a franchise thrives in animation. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me. But personally, that's my opinion. And I think this show just encapsulates it, because the animation is crisp, the sound design is phenomenal. I mean, the music itself is just chef's kiss throughout the entire show, but no more so than in the first episode. It captures you straight away with the music that they've chosen. And you know you're not watching a hero story from just the music alone. Like, it's phenomenal. And I can't fault it at all. The voice acting, as always, is amazing. Maul is always a standout character. Has been since his introduction in 1999's Phantom Menace. I almost forgot the title. I was gonna call it just Star Wars. I don't know why. The one that was just called Star Wars was A New Hope, but for some reason my brain forgot Phantom Menace, which is really weird. I watch them every year on Star Wars Day and throughout the thing, but it completely out my head. Don't know why. Oh well. Hey ho. But that being said, there are some negatives that I've got. I think there should have been more focus on Maul's side of the story rather than the Jedi and Lawson and all that stuff. But I'll talk more about that when we get into spoilers. So, talking of spoilers, let's move on from this spoiler-free part to spoilers. So if you haven't seen the show, this is your cue to click off and come back when you've seen it. Now we'll start talking about episode 1. Episode 1, I think, was a phenomenal introduction to the show. I think it hit Maul with the ground running. It introduced characters like Lawson to Boots, showed off things like that, showed that this world was built around not just Maul but other things. Maul's cleverness was on show, which was a nice way of showing that he's not just the animal that we know him as, and he does have a clever mind to him, and things like that. I loved seeing the Mandalorians, and clearly one of Sabine's relatives, there with Maul. You could see that in the armor design and hair color as well. So that was really nice to see some continuity being kept up there. I did like that. And yeah, all the stuff that was going on there with Maul and his cronies was really fun to see. I did like everything being run from the shadows. I also liked the fact that it showed off that not everyone in the galaxy is down with the Empire, with Lawson outright ignoring the decree from the ISB when when the facial scan of Maul was complete. Now we got a little bit of that in Andor, but it was cool to see it here in a medium where I'd say Andor was a bit more adult, so you wouldn't really see kids watching Andor, whereas you can have a kid watch Maul, and it's a way to have children be introduced to the idea that not everyone in the Star Wars galaxy, like I know we had the Rebels, but even those that seem to be in a position of authority, such as the authorities on this planet, weren't down with the Empire and outright went against their decrees, because they didn't want Imperial authority interfering with their local system. So they disregarded it. I also liked the contrast between humans who understood that once the Empire invaded, as they would see it, wouldn't leave. Two Boots, being a droid, only saw it from the logical, almost Spock-like, Vulcan-like logic of, but it's protocol. We have to report it to the Empire. And it did annoy me a little bit, but in a good way. Not later on in the show. It did annoy me, Two Boots' insistence on calling the Empire, but not in a way that it impacted the show and pissed me off to where I didn't like the show. In a good way, where Two Boots is supposed to be the one annoying you because he's programmed to contact the Empire. So, of course, he's insistent on contacting the Empire because he doesn't understand, being a droid, the ramifications of calling Imperial aid. I did like that. I thought it was all really, really, really good. I thought the fight scene at the end of the episode gave me full-on Rogue One Vader in the hallway scene vibes with Maul. I thought that was really, really well orchestrated. And to be honest, it was a very captivating episode. If you haven't gone and watched it, go watch this. This will have you gripped and wanting to watch the rest of the show. If you're not a Maul fan, this will probably make you one, because he's not just the savage, snarling beast that we see at the beginning, throughout Phantom Menace. He shows that he's clever through the turf war that he orchestrates between two rival gangs. It shows that he's patient and calculating to get his revenge. And it shows that when needed, he's savage. And they gave him a cold-ass introduction where he just stepped out of that ship, which was very reminiscent of him showing up in Phantom Menace. For episode 2, I do like that it jumps straight from episode 1, and shows you that things have consequences with Maul and everything going on, and we get like the philosophical center here with what is the Force for, between the Jedi's perspective of protection, sacrifice, and peace and balance, and Maul's perspective about survival, control, and revenge. I like that clash, and all that stuff that we get here. It is really, really, really good. I also like the dilemma that is put before us in this episode with Maul and the thing. It feels like the classic Heroes debacle where Maul brings down the bridge and the Jedi has to choose whether to chase Maul to get his apprentice back or to save the civilians. Obviously, the Jedi is going to choose to save the civilians, as a hero would choose to save the civilians. That is the dilemma, and that is where it comes in. It's like the trolley problem. Which one would you do? But they're trained in a specific way, and the Jedi knows his apprentice is equipped for what she needs to be equipped for. I did like that, and although it is a little bit predictable, and the lizard was a Jedi. Who would have thought? Now, obviously, I'm being sarcastic there because his trusting nature of the authorities, their secretism throughout the first episode, and the fact that neither of them would give identification kind of hinted, even if they didn't outright state it, that they were either that they were Jedi survivors. So, and I did like that the confirmation came from him having to reveal himself during the hero's dilemma. But I also liked that people didn't really realize either, because it starts to lend a bit more credence to the Han Solo of it all in in A New Hope, because there's always been a bit of a backwards and forwards with the Star Wars fandom, that Han didn't really believe in the Jedi and it in A New Hope, and it didn't really make sense if the Jedi were a massive organization going around saving the day 20 years ago. Now, Han wasn't that old, so he should have at least heard the stories or at least remembered something. Because he wasn't that old, but he wasn't that young either. So there was a bit of a discrepancy there. But showing Lawson, the police officer, witness a Jedi use the Force to stop the bridge from collapsing, and just see it as an old man in pain, shows that general citizens, even ones that have worked with Jedis before, don't always know what they're dealing with. And thus the Jedi becoming a myth makes more sense. At least that's the way I'm interpreting it. You can tell me if you guys didn't interpret it that way in the comments down below, but it feels like that was a good way to interpret it, and a good way to show the slow forgetting of what it feels like to be in the presence of a Jedi. And everything like that. As for episode 3, I feel like this was Maul's coming out. Miss Maul's manipulative era in the show, if you will. I feel like he did a really good job at toying with her and playing games in a way that feels like a cat playing with a mouse. He told her exactly how she could escape the cell. It was so good that there was so much so rich in there. I loved everything in that. There was so much there. He pushed her to embrace everything that she needed. Like, yes, he locked her in the cell, but he told her how to get out. He told her all she had to do was push herself and escape, which she did. She managed to escape in the last episode. But once she got out, he proceeded to bait her, to use patience, to just manipulate her, isolate her, push her emotions, encourage her anger, reward her vulnerability with attention. All that sort of stuff.
That's good. I can work with that. But you won't like it.
Everything he was doing was toying with her, turning everything against her. The tragedy of the fall of the Jedi. Everything. Pushing her to embrace the anger that she feels towards the Empire. It did truly feel like a cat playing with its food, a cat luring its prey, a wild animal literally enjoying the hunt. It was so fun. I really enjoyed the third episode just for this like dynamic between Maul and who we would eventually learn is Devon, the Padawan, because Maul was prodding and probing and learning about her. Because he doesn't want someone that's just outright loyal or falls to the dark side. He wants someone he can sculpt in his way through sadistic taunts. The Sith way. I do think it was really, really, really good. A good way to get her to embrace the darkness within her. There were other elements going on within the episode, but I think this was the key aspect of the episode, and it's what I've really grasped onto for episode 3. Episode 4 just feels like it was ideology over action. I feel like the episode slows the action slightly to focus on something Star Wars doesn't always explore deeply. Philosophy, Jedi versus Sith.
And you will be unharmed.
Surrender? When has that passive ideology ever served you, Jedi? Haven't you learned your lesson? It seems not.
Here, it's not just surface level, it's about the control versus freedom, emotion versus suppression, order versus survival, and Maul actually makes compelling points that it was dangerous for them to not embrace things, that the way that they were going about things now of all times was really dangerous, especially now that the Emperor had his, as Maul called them, Jedi hunters, the Inquisitors. Because by cutting themselves off from other emotions and waiting before acting, they were acting as though they were still Jedi. And while that's admirable, and Maul even says that, that's expected. And what's expected is dangerous and will not lead to survival. You can see it with Cal Kestis. While he doesn't fall to the dark side, he sort of abandons that patience mentality that you would have been taught as a Jedi and moves to a more proactive mentality throughout the game. And that proactive mentality is what leads him to be able to survive. And I feel like that's what Maul was getting at, but he was trying to corrupt it in a way. I also loved the betrayal layer here with Vero and Krim, where the Pikes highlighted something important. So to Maul, being loyal isn't a constant. He was betrayed by one of the most important people in his life. Sidious, Palpatine, was the most important person in his life. It was his father figure, his master, his everything, and he was cast aside because he was no longer useful. So to Maul, being betrayed is par for the course. And so Maul uses people with the expectation that their loyalty will wane because he doesn't expect loyalty to survive. I, I did like that. I also liked him using that expectation to get at Krim because he tricks Krim into thinking that Vero has betrayed him and taken him out to bring him to the Pikes, but it didn't actually go down that way, and then he just eliminates the Pikes and takes back over their organization. That was a very clever subversion and a way to like build off of Maul's like ideology of loyalty is only temporary. I did like how they did that. Now we get to the halfway point, and unfortunately, our good friend Two Boots did betray us. Though Lawson did betray him first, he did deactivate him and shut him down. And I haven't really talked about Lawson and everything going off there. Obviously, there's the investigation into what Maul's been doing and everything going on there. And Lawson, strained relationship with his son and his ex-wife being an Imperial and all that stuff. I didn't really talk about that, and I'll get to why in a bit because I do have a reason for it. But Two Boots has eventually betrayed us and called in the Empire, and now that the Empire is here, things start to take a slight tone change. Up until now, Maul has been the main dominant threat, but the Empire becomes the focal point. It becomes the threat. It's different, it's not personal, and it's systematic. It makes the show very clear. It makes it very clear in the show, is what I'm trying to say, that while Maul is a villain, you can't deny that. Like, I wouldn't put anti-hero on the label. I wouldn't put anything like that on that label at all. It's villain. Maul is a villain through and through. He's a bad guy. He's a manipulative, evil dude who has some sympathetic qualities. The Empire are evil, though. That's what the show tells you. Maul may be a villain, but the Empire are outright evil. And it immediately becomes clear. They outright kill the captain for nothing. She did nothing. She had nothing to do with anything Lawson was doing. Lawson is the one that didn't report it to the Empire, but she gets killed. An Inquisitor is brought through. There is tons and tons of stuff that go on throughout this occupation. Citizens are just stopped because they look suspicious. There is an outright statement by a stormtrooper where he stops a citizen and goes, "You look like you know. You look like you should know something." What does that mean?
Identification now. You look like you know something.
How can people look like they would know something? That feels like a veiled political statement in Star Wars. And if anyone tells you Star Wars isn't political, then I don't think they've been watching Star Wars properly. Stormtroopers were named Stormtroopers literally because of political reasons. After, like, Nazi Stormtroopers and things like that. The Empire is an allegory for Nazism. If you don't believe me, look it up. You can Google it. It's a aura and things like that. You have George Lucas outright saying that the rebels were inspired by the Viet Cong. I have a fun fact on our TikTok and YouTube Shorts all about that, so you can go check that out as well. More you know about that. But so Star Wars has always been political, and that does feel like a veiled political statement, especially with things that are going off in the world, but not really diving fully into that. The Inquisitors do add a new layer of danger, though, not just for Maul, but for the Jedi that have been running around. And Maul seems to have a very weird fascination with Devon. He wants her as an apprentice. It's said that he has a feeling in the Force she will be his way to take out Palpatine, but it's not really explained why he's so steadfast on this. That's one of my downs for the show. There's not enough focus on Maul and his cronies and things like that, and why Maul is doing some of the stuff he's doing. We get a little bit too much focus on Devon, her master, Lawson's son, and Two Boots. I feel like because of that, some elements are taken away from Maul's story, and that might just be a personal opinion and a personal gripe, but that's what I was feeling as I was watching this. I do feel like episode 5 does up the stakes, though. Episode 6, this is where, again, as I was saying, it slightly stumbles. It focuses heavily on Lawson and the side characters. As I was saying just a second ago, I do love their characters. I'm not saying I don't. I do think the show benefits from having like the police department and all that stuff. But I think it benefited more from Lawson and Two Boots and all that stuff when Maul was the threat. And I think the problem is they became even more of a focus here. And like with the Empire now in full effect and here and rounding people up, the personal stakes and relationships and moral conflicts are now their story. Do you know what I mean? Maul isn't at the center. He's the anchor of the show. It's named after him, where it should have been Maul that was the linchpin of the show. I feel like Lawson's become the linchpin of the show, but we get introduced to new characters through Lawson, like the shady smuggler, ex-bounty hunter, who seems to have a shady past with Lawson. We get introduced to Two Boots. We get introduced to his son. We get introduced to the Imperial woman. We get introduced to the Inquisitor first through Lawson. The Captain through Lawson. We get introduced to his wife through his son. The Jedi are first introduced through the police department and Lawson. Now, I'm not trying to bag too much on their introduction, but the problem is, this is where we start losing some of Maul's people as well, because of things that happen throughout the show, and the Sith coming after Maul, the Empire coming after Maul, and the Jedi, and I don't feel anything. I don't care that Maul is losing people, because I don't care about these people. Like, because their connections aren't built up or interesting or solid. Not like when Two Boots betrayed Lawson, because Lawson and Two Boots' connection and backstory had been hammered home, and I felt that connection, and I felt that friendship, and I felt that bond. So when Lawson deactivated Two Boots, and then Two Boots turned around and called the Empire, I felt that. But when Mercenary Man stole credits and jumped on the ship and then instant comeuppance got blown up. Cool. I was like, well, he deserved that instant karma. Like, because there was no connection or anything. And it's because too much focus was given to Lawson and his side of the story, and not enough focus was given to Maul's. It's my only downside, really, to this show. I wish we'd have got more on Maul's side, and I think Disney and Star Wars and Lucasfilm played it a little safe and were a little bit too worried about focusing too much on a villain. And I think that's why we got so much focus on the Jedi and Lawson. I do really think that. But that's why I do think that episode 6 of them all is the weakest, because it focuses the most on them. Obviously, I did touch on what happens in episode 7 in that discussion with the Maul's crew turning on him, and it's entirely his fault. He focuses too much on getting the apprentice and then leaving, which means his men who were just there for money desert him. They don't care about the apprentice, so of course they're gonna desert him. It's entirely his fault that his group starts collapsing and everything. But as I said in that section, had we focused more on their dichotomy and everything, and maybe their group beforehand, them starting to fall apart because of their greed and Maul's ruling through fear and obsession with Devon, would have hit better. I think this is where it does start to crumble between episode 6 and 7. Although Two Boots does get a reality check here, a little bit, with Riley being captured and things like that. So he starts to finally realize that maybe his actions have consequences, but I'm not sure it's hammered home really yet in this specific episode, but I think it's starting to get there, especially where there's lines where he's not allowed to wear his boots and stuff like that. And I think he's starting to realize that he's made a mistake, but I'm not sure if it's too late. And by the time we get the emotional payoffs for all this, maybe it should have been done earlier, especially when it comes to some of the character deaths we got with Maul's crew. As I've been saying, I feel like I've repeated myself. But episode 8 is one of my favourites. We get a full deep dive into Maul's psyche in this episode, with Maul being hurt from an attack with the Inquisitors in the last episode. And his leg being injured, and basically, when his men were killed off and all that stuff, the Inquisitors managed to damage one of Maul's robot legs. With Maul damaged and in pain, he's now reliving some memories that we've seen before, but now we're living them through Maul's perspective. And we're getting Maul's internal struggle. And it's kind of hard hitting. We see some of the training that he was put through by Sidious, and when he messes up, Sidious just strikes him with lightning.
Now, take it.
It shows that Maul isn't just this savage animal out for revenge, but he's a deeply traumatized, psychologically haunted man that's been abused by Palpatine since he was a child, and then when he was finally abandoned, all he wanted was to prove his strength and get revenge, only to lead to his brother Savage's death, and that has stuck with him. Maul is a broken individual, and I think this psychological deep dive and analyzation of Maul was so perfect that it just... Episode 8 is the best episode. There is so much more that happens in the episode, but if I'm going to focus on anything for this specifically, it's going to be the deep dive into Maul's psyche. I think it was so well done, and it makes me love Maul even more. Maul was already my favorite Star Wars character next to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, it literally went Obi-Wan Kenobi, Maul, Darth Vader. Like, but Maul is now my number one dark side user of all time. The deep dive into his psyche is so perfect. Yes, we got Anakin's backstory and all that stuff, and we know everything that I don't particularly rate Vader at the top of my... He's like second, but he's not like my number one. And I think Sidious is just ridiculous. But he's powerful, don't get me wrong, but he's a creepy old man. Maul, on the other hand, I love the traumatized backstory of Maul. I think they did a phenomenal job of showing Maul not just as a savage beast, but as a calculating criminal, as a traumatized boy, and as a ruthless individual. Putting all three together was chef's kiss. But episode 9, they all come together, and wow, this episode really did build the tension. It was a fantastic penultimate episode. It really did have you on the edge of your seat for me, especially with them teaming up and running away from everything, trying to get to the ship that they'd set up with the Crimson Sun, which was sort of a setup to Solo, a Star Wars story, or at least Maul's cameo at the end of that film. So I did like that and all that stuff, and them running off to that. I loved the whole no one really trusting Maul, but realizing that they kind of need Maul to get there, and Maul using the Force to manipulate Devon through her dreams was a really good thing, and felt very Sidious, and how Sidious manipulated Anakin into becoming Darth Vader. I did like that callback to the fact that he was the student of the Emperor in the first place, so of course he's going to use similar tactics, and then obviously they meet up and they start running from the Inquisitors, and then the episode ends and you hear the... And of course, it's Darth Vader. What a reveal. What a treat for May the 4th. It was phenomenal. What we got, all that. We got all that character building, all that stuff with the Jedi. We got Maul's full deep dive in episode 8. We got all Maul manipulating Devon. We got them running away through surface tunnels, and backstory for Lawson chasing a fugitive, and a bit of a joke there, and Two Boots' redemption in earlier episodes where he saved Riley, Lawson's son, from the Empire and got him out, and now it's culminating in them running into Lord Vader. Wow. And then the final episode, we got Darth Maul versus Darth Vader. Sidious's first apprentice versus his last apprentice. And can we just say, Vader represents He didn't even look like he was breaking a sweat throughout that entire confrontation between him, Maul, and two Jedi.
What are you?
I mean, I know one's a Padawan, but still, that's 3-on-1, and Vader looked like he was handling them with ease. It was so cool and so fun to see Vader's raw power. And Vader not speaking throughout the entire fight, like not using recycled voice lines. I know I've already mentioned this, but not using them was peak. Like, not using them at all it added to the terror of Vader being there. Because they could have. They have the rights to use James Earl Jones's voice. So, they could have used recycled voice lines, and them choosing not to do so, I feel like added to the scariness and seriousness of Vader being there. It was absolutely genius. And props to the sound design team for doing so, and whoever came up with the concept of doing that. Meanwhile, Lawson did the ultimate sacrifice and completed his whole arc of being there for his son, which, wow, cool. I'm sorry. If Lawson became one of your favorite characters, I am sorry. I didn't really care for his character. And then he got killed off, and everybody escaped aboard the Crimson Dawn ship. And Devon's master died at the hands of Darth Vader with a helping hand from Maul. A little force push there to get him in the path so Maul could run, and he was dead. But she saw it, and now she blames Vader, cementing her corruption and her eventual tutelage by Maul. So with that being said, and the way that they ended it off, I hope that we do get a season 2, because this does look like it's piggybacking off of the cameo we got in Solo, and it does look like it filled in the gaps from the end of season 7 of Clone Wars, and hopefully we can get like a whole backstory between the cameo in Solo to how he ends up in Rebels. Maybe season 2 can answer that question. That would be really fun. But with that being said, my final thoughts on this.
All right. I'm ready.
I think it was a brilliant show. I think it culminated in absolutely everything that we needed for it. My only gripe, and I know I've harped on about it, is if you're going to name the show Maul, focus on Maul. Not the side characters, and not like anything like that. Like, Lawson and his story was entertaining, and it would have been great had the show been about that. Like, if it had been a Tales from the Empire episode about a law enforcement officer during the Empire who was resisting the Empire, and then had to go on the run with his child, only to sacrifice himself so his child could have a better life. That would have been really cool. However, because the show was about Maul, and I felt that a lot of the episodes were taken up by Lawson's story, with Maul being pushed not to the back seat, but Lawson for a few episodes was put in the forefront and Maul was pushed behind. I feel like it should have been the other way around. Like, Maul should have been the A story and Lawson should have been the B story, if that is what you wanted to do. But it didn't feel like that. And usually Star Wars are really good at having A and B stories. Check out Clone Wars for that. They do that a lot. But hey ho, maybe they were trying to build a new character, and Maul does already have fans. So maybe that's what they were trying to bank on. And we did get that whole character story in episode 8. So I can't fault you for that. The only problem is that Maul's crew were all, pretty much all, wiped out, including his droid. And I didn't really feel anything for them because of the fact that we focused too much on Lawson's family. Like, if Two Boots had died, I would have felt something. But when Maul's droid died, I didn't feel anything. And I don't know if that was me, because I was focusing on it for review purposes rather than engaging it for entertainment purposes, or not. Let me know in the comments if you felt the same thing. But as I would still give this a solid 8 out of 10. I'd just knock it down by 2, just because I do think it focused too much on Lawson. But with that being said, I'm going to call this video to an end. If you have liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and most of all, stay nerdy.